Dr. Elijah Brooks, a brilliant black heart surgeon, is denied entry into an elite hospital when a powerful CEO's son needs urgent surgery. Despite humiliation, he saves the boy's life, exposing the hospital's deep prejudice. As media outrage grows, Elijah faces an internal investigation meant to silence him, but the CEO, changed by gratitude and guilt, defends him publicly. Months later, Elijah builds his own hospital, open to everyone, symbolizing hope and equality. In healing one heart, he heals a system that once shut him out, proving that compassion, not color, defines greatness. Rain hammered the city that morning like an unending drumbeat, washing the glass towers of Hale Medical Group into streaks of silver and gray. Inside the marble lobby, nurses and doctors hurried through the revolving doors, their white coats fluttering behind them like flags of privilege. The scent of antiseptic and fresh coffee hung in the air, but beneath it all, something colder lingered, an unspoken hierarchy. Dr. Elijah Brooks stood under the awning just outside the hospital's main entrance, his navy blue suit damp, his medical bag clutched tight. His breath fogged in the air as he looked up at the shining letters that spelled, Hale Memorial Hospital. For years, he'd dreamed of walking through those doors as a colleague, not a visitor. Today, he'd been invited for a consultation, one that could finally put his name on the city's map of top cardiothoracic surgeons. He adjusted his tie, took a steadying breath, and stepped toward the glass doors. But before he could reach them, a voice snapped behind him. "Excuse me, sir. This entrance is for staff and authorized personnel only." Elijah turned. A security guard stood by the door, a tall man with an earpiece and an expression carved in suspicion. His hand hovered near his radio. "I'm Dr. Brooks," Elijah said calmly, reaching into his coat pocket. "I have an appointment with Dr. Morgan Lee at 9. The guard didn't even glance at the ID. "You said doctor?" "Yes." Elijah held out his credentials. "Cardiac surgeon. Dr. Morgan Lee requested my consultation." The guard's eyes narrowed. And you're telling me you're the doctor?" He gave a small, humorless chuckle, glancing over Elijah's tailored suit as if it were borrowed. Elijah felt that familiar burn, one he'd learned to hide since medical school. He'd been questioned in hospitals, airports, and conferences alike. Still, he kept his voice steady. "That's correct." The guard pressed his earpiece. "Yeah, got a mail, says he's a doctor." "Brooks." "Okay." He paused, then nodded. "Someone will come down." Elijah waited as raindrops soaked his shoulders. Minutes passed. Staff members streamed in and out, glancing curiously at the man standing outside in the rain. He caught fragments of their murmurs: security issue, random visitor, wrong building maybe? When the elevator doors finally opened, Dr. Morgan Lee emerged, a woman in her late 40s, her white coat crisp, her posture sharp as glass. "What's going on here?" she asked the guard, irritation dripping from her tone. "This man says he's here to see you, Dr. Lee," the guard replied. Morgan looked at Elijah, her brow tightening for just a moment before she composed herself. "Oh, you must be Dr. Brooks." Her voice carried the smoothness of someone skilled in diplomacy. "You'll have to forgive the confusion. Security's been tight lately." The guard stepped aside, but Elijah caught the hesitation in his eyes. "It's fine," Elijah said, forcing a polite smile. "Just glad to finally get inside." As they walked through the gleaming corridor, the smell of sterilized air thickened. Morgan's heels clicked against the marble floor. "You come highly recommended," she said without looking at him. "Dr. Hale himself approved your consultation. It's quite the opportunity." "I'm honored," Elijah replied. "I've studied the Hale system for years. Their approach to pediatric heart surgery is revolutionary." "Yes," Morgan said curtly. "We like to think so." They entered a private conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. A large screen displayed complex cardiac scans. "Our patient," Morgan began, "is Ethan Hale, CEO Richard Hale's son. 17 years old. Congenital heart defect. 3 previous operations. None successful." Elijah leaned in, eyes scanning the data. "He's developing post-surgical cardiomyopathy," he murmured. "His left ventricle's deteriorating." Morgan crossed her arms. "Our surgeons believe another operation is too risky." Elijah straightened. I disagree. There's a minimally invasive approach, still experimental, but with the right team. Before he could finish, the door swung open. Richard Hale himself entered, commanding the room like a storm in a tailored suit. His silver hair gleamed under the lights. Dr. Brooks, I presume? Elijah extended his hand. Mr. Hale. It's an honor. Richard shook it briefly. You're from, what's the name? Lincoln Memorial Hospital, right? Small place downtown. Yes, sir. We handle complex cases. I'm sure you do, Richard interrupted smoothly. But my son's case requires experience at scale. No offense. Elijah felt the jab but stood firm. Experience is measured by outcomes, Mr. Hale, not building size. Morgan's eyes flicked nervously between them. Richard gave a faint smile. Fair enough. We'll review your proposal. When Elijah left the meeting, his chest was tight, not from nerves but from the quiet humiliation that hung in the air. He'd seen it before, polite dismissal wrapped in professional courtesy. Outside the hospital, Alicia was waiting by her car. How'd it go? She asked, pushing back her umbrella. Elijah exhaled. They smiled. They nodded. But it's clear, they don't trust me. Alicia frowned. You're one of the best heart surgeons in the city. Not in their city, Elijah said, glancing back at the shining building. In there, I'm just another name they didn't expect to look like me. Alicia's expression hardened. Then make them remember it. That night, Elijah stayed at his clinic downtown, poring over Ethan Hale scans. He couldn't let the rejection sink in. Every image told a story, the slow weakening of a young heart fighting to live. He drafted a surgical plan anyway. Not for them, but for the boy. As midnight neared, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. Dr. Brooks. A woman's voice came through, urgent and trembling. This is Dr. Lee. You need to come back. It's Ethan. He's gone into cardiac arrest. We can't stabilize him. Elijah froze. What? You heard me, Morgan said, her composure cracking. We're losing him. Elijah grabbed his coat. I'll be there in 15 minutes. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky as Elijah sprinted through the rain, each drop mixing with the pulse in his veins. The hospital that had rejected him hours ago was now calling for his hands, the same hands they had doubted. And deep down, Elijah knew this was the moment everything would change. The hospital lobby was nearly empty when Elijah burst through the glass doors, rain dripping from his coat. Security moved to intercept him again, but this time, his eyes burned with something they hadn't seen before. Purpose, not permission. I was called in for an emergency, he said sharply, flashing his ID. Dr. Lee requested me personally. Patient, Ethan Hale. The guard hesitated, hand twitching near his radio again. Then, from behind the desk, a nurse recognized him from earlier. It's okay, she said quickly. They're expecting him in cardiac ICU. Elijah didn't wait for further approval. He sprinted to the elevators, his wet shoes squeaking against the sterile tile. His reflection in the mirrored walls looked like another man entirely, driven, defiant, soaked in both rain and resolve. When the doors opened, chaos spilled into the corridor. Alarms screamed. Nurses rushed past carrying trays and defibrillators. Elijah caught sight of Dr. Morgan Lee outside a glass-walled ICU room, shouting orders. BP dropping, 50/30 and falling, someone yelled. Elijah pushed forward. What's his rhythm? Morgan turned, startled to see him. You're not authorized to. Tell me his rhythm, he snapped. Her hesitation lasted half a second too long. Elijah brushed past her, stepping into the room. Ethan Hale lay pale and motionless, his young chest heaving beneath a tangle of wires. His lips were tinted blue. A monitor beeped wildly as a nurse squeezed oxygen into his lungs. V-fib, a resident shouted. Elijah's voice cut through the noise. Charge to 200 now. Wait, Dr. Brooks, you can't, Morgan started, but he was already gloving up. Do it, he barked. The nurse obeyed instinctively. Elijah took the paddles, placed them against Ethan's chest, and shouted, Clear! The boy's body jerked. The monitor spiked, then flatlined again. "Charge to 300, Elijah said, sweat mixing with rain on his forehead. Morgan's voice rose, anxious. "We've tried 3 shocks already." "And I'm trying again," he snapped. "Clear." The second shock hit. A long, endless second passed. Then, the faintest blip. "Sinus rhythm," a nurse gasped. "We've got a pulse." A collective breath swept through the room. Elijah exhaled hard, lowering the paddles. Ethan's chest began to rise and fall more steadily now, the monitor settling into a weak but present heartbeat. Morgan stared at him, shocked, silent. "How did you?" Elijah's tone softened. "He's young. His heart wants to fight. You just have to know how to listen." For a long moment, no one spoke. The staff exchanged glances, the tension thawing into quiet respect. But the calm didn't last. From the hallway, a new voice thundered, "What the hell is going on here?" Richard Hale stood in the doorway, his tailored coat half on, his face pale with panic. Behind him, 2 board members trailed like shadows. Morgan hurried forward. "Sir, your son went into arrest. We managed to stabilize him." "We?" Richard's gaze cut to Elijah. Recognition flashed in his eyes. "You again?" Elijah met his stare evenly. "Yes, Mr. Hale. You called for help." "I answered." Richard's face hardened. "You weren't cleared to touch my son." "Then you should thank the bureaucracy for being slow," Elijah said quietly. "Because a minute later, your son would have been gone." The words hung heavy in the sterile air. For a brief instant, something like gratitude flickered in Richard's eyes, then vanished beneath pride. "Dr. Lee, escort him out. I'll decide what happens next." Elijah stripped off his gloves. "You decide whatever you like," he said. "But your son isn't out of danger yet. He needs surgery, soon." Richard's jaw tightened. "We have our own team." "Your team already gave up on him," Elijah said, voice steady. "I didn't." Morgan's eyes darted between them. The weight of truth pressed against her silence. Elijah could see the calculation behind her calm expression, career versus conscience. Finally, she spoke. "Dr. Brooks is right. Ethan won't last another arrest. We're out of time." Richard turned away, pressing his fingers against his temple. For once, the CEO didn't have an immediate answer. Hours later, Elijah sat alone in the staff lounge, a disposable coffee cup trembling between his hands. He could still hear the echo of monitors in his ears. The night outside was silent except for the rain hitting the window. He thought of Alicia's words, "Make them remember it." He hadn't planned to make a scene. He'd planned to earn respect through skill, not confrontation. But life, he realized, rarely gave you the luxury of choosing how people saw you. The door creaked open. Dr. Morgan Lee stepped inside, her coat wrinkled, her face drawn. "You shouldn't have been here," she said softly, "but you saved him." Elijah met her eyes. "Then let me finish the job." "You mean the surgery?" He nodded. "A hybrid valve replacement. No open-heart incision. I've done it twice before. It's risky, but it's his only chance." Morgan hesitated. "Richard won't allow it." Elijah leaned forward. "You've seen the scans. You know what will happen if we wait." She rubbed her temples, sighing. "Even if I agreed, the board—" "Forget the board," Elijah interrupted. "Forget politics. This is a 17-year-old boy. You swore the same oath I did." Her composure cracked just slightly. "And if it fails? If you lose him on the table, do you understand what that would mean? For you, for me, for the entire hospital." Elijah's answer came quietly. "I understand what it would mean for him if I don't try." Morgan looked away, then back again. Something in his voice, his certainty, pierced through her fear. After a long pause, she exhaled. "I'll talk to Hale. Don't get your hopes up." Morning crept through the blinds in pale streaks of gold. Elijah hadn't slept. He paced the waiting area, mind replaying the night's events. Then, at last, Morgan appeared, eyes tired but resolute. "He agreed," she said. Elijah froze. What? Conditional approval. You operate, but under observation. The entire board will be watching. Elijah gave a faint, tired smile. Then I'll make it worth their time. Morgan's expression softened. You're not doing this for them, are you? He shook his head. I'm doing it for Ethan. Inside the tension was a living thing. Behind the glass observation window, Richard Hale and the board members stood like judges in a silent tribunal. Cameras recorded every move. Elijah scrubbed in, the smell of iodine sharp in the air. His hands moved with precision, each motion practiced, deliberate. The nurses exchanged quiet glances. Most of them had never seen a surgeon so calm beneath scrutiny. "Scalpel," he said. The nurse handed it over. The first incision was made, a clean line of purpose. As the surgery began, Elijah entered a zone where fear had no place. Every beat of Ethan's heart synced with the rhythm of his focus. Every instrument in his hand became an extension of faith. From behind the glass, Richard watched, arms crossed, face unreadable. The same man who had doubted Elijah hours ago now stood powerless before his skill. 3 hours later, the final suture was placed. The monitors stabilized. A strong, steady heartbeat pulsed through the speakers. Elijah removed his gloves, exhaling for the first time in what felt like days. "Procedure complete," he said quietly. "Heart stable." Through the window, Richard Hale's mask of control began to crack. He pressed his hand to the glass, staring at his son, alive. Elijah looked up briefly, and for the first time, neither man spoke. But everything had changed. The morning after the surgery, the city glimmered under the light drizzle that never seemed to end that week. In the private recovery wing of Hale Memorial, the air was quieter than usual, muted by awe, confusion, and a trace of disbelief. Dr. Elijah Brooks stood at the end of Ethan Hale's bed, hands folded, eyes fixed on the slow, steady rise and fall of the boy's chest. Machines hummed rhythmically, like a mechanical lullaby. It was the sound of victory, fragile, precious, and earned. Ethan's eyelids fluttered. The boy's lips parted weakly. "Am I?" His voice was barely a whisper. "You're safe," Elijah said softly, stepping closer. "You made it through." Ethan blinked, gaze unfocused, but when he managed to focus on Elijah, confusion crossed his face. "You're not from this hospital, right?" Elijah smiled faintly. "No. I'm from the other side of town." "The side my dad doesn't drive through?" Ethan asked. Elijah chuckled quietly. "Something like that." Before he could say more, the door opened, and Richard Hale entered, flanked by 2 hospital executives and Dr. Morgan Lee. His normally composed face was pale, eyes red-rimmed from a sleepless night. For once, the aura of control was gone, replaced by something human. "Ethan," Richard said, voice tight with emotion. He hurried to his son's side, grasping his hand. "You scared the hell out of me." Ethan gave a faint smile. "Guess I wanted some attention." Morgan murmured something to the nurses, then approached Elijah quietly. "His vitals are stable. He's going to pull through." Elijah nodded. "His heart's strong. He'll need close monitoring, but the hard part's over." Richard looked up then, meeting Elijah's gaze. The silence between them was thick, too full for words. Finally, Richard said, "You saved my son's life." "I did my job," Elijah replied evenly. Richard hesitated. "You did more than that." The executives shifted awkwardly. Morgan cleared her throat. "Dr. Brooks, the board will want to debrief you later today. For now, get some rest." "You've earned it." Elijah turned to leave. As he passed Richard, the CEO said softly, "Thank you." Elijah paused, eyes unreadable. "You're welcome, Mr. Hale." By afternoon, the story had already leaked. A nurse with a phone, a whisper in the cafeteria. Within hours, social media lit up with headlines. Black surgeon saves CEO's son after hospital refused his entry. Hero doctor or scandal waiting to happen. Alicia Brooks arrived at the hospital soon after, phone in hand, eyes blazing. "You've gone viral," she said, half laughing, half furious. "They're already trying to spin it, hospital teamwork, fortunate timing, all that PR garbage." Elijah sighed, rubbing his temples. "I didn't do this for publicity, Alicia." "I know you didn't," she said, softening. "But people need to know what happened. They need to see what you faced, what you still face." He looked at her, weary. "You think the truth will change how they see me?" Alicia crossed her arms. "Maybe not all of them. But someone out there, some kid watching this, might finally believe they belong in a white coat too." Elijah smiled faintly. His sister had always been the fighter in the family. "You haven't changed." "Neither have you," she said. "Still trying to heal the world one heart at a time." Hours later, Elijah sat alone in the hospital cafeteria, sipping lukewarm coffee as the evening news flickered on a wall-mounted TV. The anchor's voice carried across the empty space. In an unexpected turn, Dr. Elijah Brooks, an independent cardiac surgeon, performed a life-saving emergency procedure on Ethan Hale, son of billionaire healthcare mogul Richard Hale. Sources report Dr. Brooks was initially denied entry to Hale Memorial earlier the same day. Elijah stared at the screen, numb. The camera panned to a brief clip, him entering the hospital in the rain, then a still photo from the operating room. He didn't care about fame. But he did care about the message buried beneath it. When Morgan Lee approached from behind, he barely noticed. "You should know," she said quietly, sliding into the seat opposite him. "The board is furious." Elijah looked up, unsurprised. "Because I broke their rules?" "Because you made them look small," she said. "This hospital built its reputation on exclusivity, not inclusivity. You challenged that in one night." He leaned back. "And they'd rather protect their image than their patients." She didn't deny it. "Richard's already in meetings trying to control the narrative. The board wants to issue a statement crediting the entire surgical team." Elijah's jaw clenched. "Of course they do." Morgan hesitated. "But Richard's conflicted. You saved his son. That changes people. Even men like him." Elijah gave a bitter smile. "We'll see." By nightfall, the hospital boardroom was filled again. The same sleek glass table, the same polished chairs, the same people who had doubted him 24 hours earlier. Elijah sat at one end, feeling every eye on him. Richard Hale stood near the head of the table, sleeves rolled up, exhaustion etched across his face. "Let's be clear," said one board member, a woman in a charcoal suit. "While we appreciate Dr. Brooks' intervention, the hospital cannot appear negligent or discriminatory." "Negligent?" Alicia's voice rang out from the doorway. She'd slipped into the meeting with her press credentials dangling. "You were negligent. You let bias delay a doctor who could have saved that boy hours earlier." Murmurs spread through the room. Morgan looked startled but didn't intervene. Richard raised a hand. "Miss Brooks." "No," Alicia said firmly. "You want control of the story? Then tell it right. Tell the truth." The room went silent. Richard looked at Elijah, who sat still, eyes calm but piercing. Finally, Richard exhaled. "She's right." Gasps fluttered around the table. He continued, voice steady but low. "We made a mistake. I made a mistake. I let perception decide who was qualified to save my son. And if Dr. Brooks hadn't ignored protocol, Ethan wouldn't be alive." Elijah felt the room shift, like the air had been sucked out. He hadn't expected that. Morgan closed her eyes briefly, relief flickering across her face. The board member who had spoken earlier frowned. "Mr. Hale, are you suggesting—" "I'm not suggesting anything," Richard interrupted. "I'm stating fact. And from this moment on, Dr. Brooks is an affiliate surgeon of Hale Medical Group." The silence that followed was thunderous. Elijah blinked, stunned. "Mr. Hale, that's not necessary." "Yes, it is," Richard said. "Because the truth is, you've done more for this hospital's integrity in one night than we've done in a decade." Alicia smiled faintly. "Guess we're finally rewriting the narrative." Later, as Elijah stood outside the hospital once more, the rain had finally stopped. The streets glistened beneath the streetlights, and the letters, Hale Memorial, gleamed in quiet reflection on the wet pavement. He looked up at the building, no longer with resentment, but with understanding. Morgan stepped out beside him. "You realize," she said softly, "you've just changed everything." Elijah gave a tired smile. "I didn't set out to change the world." She looked at him. "You might have done it anyway." From behind them, Richard Hale emerged, hands in his pockets. He paused, then extended his hand. This time, there was no hesitation, no condescension, only humility. Elijah shook it. "Thank you," Richard said again. Elijah's answer was simple, quiet, and full of truth. "Just doing what I was trained to do, save lives. Even when people don't see mine." And as he walked away into the dawn, the first rays of sunlight touched the hospital's glass walls, no longer reflecting exclusion, but the beginning of change. The following week, Hale Memorial was no longer a hospital, it was a headline. Every news outlet ran the story. Some praised the miracle surgeon who defied bias and saved a billionaire's son. Others picked apart the institution's hypocrisy. Cameras crowded the hospital's front gates. Protesters gathered, waving signs that read, "Let skill speak, not skin," and "Equality saves lives too." Elijah had never asked for fame, but it found him anyway. His phone buzzed endlessly. Journalists, old colleagues, medical boards. Even universities wanted him for speaking engagements. The story of the doctor who wasn't let in but saved them all had become legend overnight. But behind the glass walls of Hale Memorial, the atmosphere was less celebratory. In the top-floor boardroom, blinds were drawn. The board members sat around the long, sleek table, the tension thick enough to cut with a scalpel. Richard Hale stood at the head, hands clasped behind his back. Morgan Lee sat 2 seats away, silent but watchful. "Public opinion's out of control," one member said sharply. "The board's being painted as racist incompetence. Our stocks dropped 12% in 4 days." Another chimed in. "We can't let this man define our hospital. He's not one of us." Richard's jaw flexed. "He's the reason we still have a hospital," he said quietly. "Because he broke our rules," snapped another voice. "He disobeyed protocol, barged into a restricted OR, and now he's making us look like fools." Morgan leaned forward. "He broke rules to save a dying boy. That's what medicine is supposed to be." The room erupted in low murmurs. Richard's voice cut through them like steel. "Enough." Silence. He looked around the room, his tone cool but final. "You all care about optics. I care about my son. He's alive because of that man. And if you think I'm going to let this institution destroy him, you're mistaken." The board members exchanged wary glances. One cleared his throat. "Public sentiment won't last forever, Richard. Soon enough, this will turn, especially once we release the official report." Richard's gaze sharpened. "What report?" The man hesitated. "The internal investigation. It's standard practice after an unsanctioned procedure." Morgan's head snapped up. "You're investigating him?" "Not just him," the member replied smoothly. "Dr. Lee as well, for authorizing the operation without written consent." Richard's tone dropped. "You'd punish the people who saved my son?" "It's not punishment," the man said, trying to sound reasonable. "It's containment. The media storm will fade. But if we allow him to stay, we risk setting a precedent. Every doctor will think they can defy protocol whenever they please." Richard's eyes narrowed, but he didn't respond. Morgan glanced at him, alarm flashing in her expression. She could see it. The CEO was torn between gratitude and self-preservation. Down in the recovery ward, Elijah was visiting Ethan again. The boy's color had returned, and his spirit with it. "You look stronger every day," Elijah said, smiling. Ethan grinned. "I feel stronger. They said I'll be out by next week." "That's good news." There was a pause, then Ethan asked, "Are you coming back here?" "To work." Elijah hesitated. "That's complicated." Ethan frowned. "Why?" "You saved me." Elijah chuckled softly. "Hospitals aren't always about saving people. Sometimes they're about politics." "Then that's messed up," Ethan said simply. Elijah looked at him, this kid, born into wealth, yet speaking pure truth. "You're right," he said. "It is." Just then, Morgan entered, her face pale. "Elijah, we need to talk." They stepped into the hallway. Her voice dropped. "They're opening an investigation." He blinked. "Into what?" "Your surgery. Our authorization. They're framing it as a breach of ethics." Elijah's jaw clenched. "I saved a life." "I know," she said. "But you embarrassed powerful people in front of cameras. They don't forgive that." He sighed, staring down the corridor. "So what happens now?" Morgan hesitated. "Richard's torn. He's trying to protect his image and his gratitude at the same time." Elijah gave a bitter smile. "That's one surgery I can't perform." Later that evening, Alicia stormed into his clinic downtown, slamming a newspaper on his desk. The headline screamed, "Hero Doctor Under Investigation. Hale Medical Questions Surgical Ethics." Below it, Elijah's photo, calm, focused, mid-surgery. "They're trying to ruin you," she snapped. "They want to turn you from hero to liability." Elijah leaned back, rubbing his temples. "I expected it." "You expected it?" Alicia stared at him, furious. "Elijah, you can't keep letting these people step on you and call it professionalism." He met her glare evenly. "You think I should fight fire with fire?" "I think you should tell the world what really happened," she said, voice sharp. "How they left you standing in the rain, how they questioned you, how you saved their golden boy anyway." Elijah was silent for a long moment. "And then what?" "They'll call it revenge. Anger. Unprofessional conduct." "Then let them," Alicia shot back. "You've got nothing left to lose." He looked out the window, rain streaking the glass. "That's where you're wrong. If I stoop to their level, I lose everything that makes me who I am." Alicia's voice softened. "You're too good for this world, Eli." He smiled faintly. "Then maybe it's time the world caught up." Days later, the board's report leaked, anonymously. It claimed Elijah had acted without authorization, jeopardizing patient safety, and violating institutional hierarchy. The internet exploded again, but this time, the outrage burned hotter. #JusticeForDr Brooks trended worldwide. Thousands signed petitions demanding the investigation be dropped. Medical students marched outside Hale Memorial with placards reading, "Compassion is not a crime." Inside his office, Richard Hale watched the protests from his window. Ethan's voice echoed in his mind, "Dad, you can't let them do this to him." He closed his eyes. For the first time in years, Richard felt something he couldn't control, his conscience. 2 days later, Elijah was summoned to a closed-door hearing. The board sat across from him like a tribunal, expressionless. Morgan sat nearby, silent support in her eyes. Richard entered last, papers in hand. He looked exhausted, but resolute. "Dr. Brooks," the chairwoman began, "this hearing will determine whether your affiliation with Hale Medical is terminated." Elijah didn't flinch. "I understand." Before she could continue, Richard raised a hand. "You won't need to finish that sentence." All eyes turned to him. He placed a document on the table. "Effective immediately, the investigation is closed. All allegations are withdrawn." Murmurs broke out. The chairwoman frowned. "Richard, you can't unilaterally." "I can," he said sharply. "And I just did. Dr. Brooks saved my son. He's not the problem, he's the standard. If that makes any of you uncomfortable, you can hand in your resignations." The room went dead silent. Morgan stared at him, stunned. Elijah said nothing, only nodded once in quiet acknowledgement. Richard turned toward him. "I can't undo what happened at those doors. But I can make sure it never happens again." That night, Elijah stood outside the hospital one more time. The protests had died down, replaced by candlelight vigils and thank-you banners taped to the walls. One read, "He healed more than a heart, he healed a system." Alicia joined him, hands in her coat pockets. "So, what happens now?" Elijah smiled faintly. "Now, I go back to work. People still need healing." She nudged him. "You ever think about running your own hospital?" He laughed softly. "Maybe one day." Behind them, the hospital lights glowed warm and alive, no longer a fortress, but a symbol of change. For the first time in years, Elijah felt something he'd almost forgotten. Hope. 6 months later, the plaque went up. Brooks Institute of Community Medicine. Founded by Dr. Elijah Brooks, M.D. For those who were told they don't belong. The building stood on the edge of Southfield, the neighborhood where Elijah had grown up, where ambulance sirens replaced lullabies and healthcare was a luxury. The walls gleamed white, the doors open to everyone. No gatekeeping. No questioning credentials at the door. Just medicine and mercy. Elijah stood outside, hands in the pockets of his lab coat, watching as a group of neighborhood kids ran through the entrance laughing. Behind him, Alicia approached, holding a folded newspaper. "You made the front page again," she said, smirking. "Doctor Who changed the game. Elijah Brooks opens hospital for all." He chuckled softly. "Guess I finally got some good press." "You earned it," she said. "After everything they put you through." Elijah looked up at the clean silver letters of his name. "I didn't build this because of them," he said. "I built it because of everyone who never got the chance I did." Alicia smiled, but there was warmth in her eyes. "And because of a kid named Ethan." Elijah nodded slowly. "Yeah, him too." The grand opening was packed. Patients, doctors, journalists, and students filled the atrium. A local choir sang softly in the background, the sound rising through the glass ceiling. Morgan Lee stepped up to the microphone, introducing him. "When I met Dr. Brooks, he was the most qualified man being kept outside a hospital door. Today, he opens one that will never close." Applause filled the room. Elijah stepped forward, taking in the crowd. He didn't carry a speech, just a heartbeat and truth. "When I was 12, he began, "my mother got sick. We went to a hospital uptown. They made us wait 4 hours. By the time we saw a doctor, it was too late." The room quieted. "I swore that day I'd become the doctor my mother never had. But somewhere along the way, I realized it wasn't just about saving lives. It was about saving dignity. No one should have to fight for permission to be cared for." He looked around the hall, faces from every walk of life gazing back. "This place isn't just for patients. It's for doctors, nurses, students, anyone who's been told they don't belong. Here, merit is enough." The applause came again, long and emotional. Elijah stepped back from the mic, heart full. Among the crowd, a familiar face approached, Richard Hale. His suit was simple, his demeanor quieter than Elijah remembered. Ethan stood beside him, taller now, his face bright with health. "Dr. Brooks," Richard said, extending his hand. "You've built something extraordinary." Elijah shook it. "I had good motivation." Richard nodded. "I wanted to thank you properly this time. Not as a CEO, but as a father." Ethan grinned. "I told him you'd say no to the board's offer again." Elijah chuckled. "They tried to buy me." "Tried," Ethan said. "Dad wanted you to head a new wing at Hale." Elijah looked at Richard. "You still trying to make things right?" Richard's voice softened. "I'm trying to learn how." Elijah studied him for a moment, then nodded. "That's a good start." They exchanged a quiet, respectful silence before Ethan hugged him unexpectedly. Elijah froze for a second, then smiled and patted the boy's shoulder. "You're looking strong," he said. Ethan grinned. "I start pre-med next year." "That's so?" "Yeah," Ethan said proudly. "I'm gonna be a heart surgeon." "Like you." Elijah's smile faltered slightly, caught off guard by the emotion rising in his chest. "Then the world's going to be in good hands." Later that evening, when the guests had gone and the halls were still echoing with laughter, Elijah walked through the empty corridors. He stopped by one of the patient rooms, bare, clean, ready. He could still smell the faint trace of antiseptic and fresh paint. Morgan appeared behind him, clipboard in hand. "We're already booked for the week. Community turnout's huge." "That's good," Elijah said softly. She leaned against the doorframe. "You ever think about how far you've come?" He gave a small smile. "Every day." Morgan studied him for a moment. "You could have left this city. Taken a cushy job somewhere else. Why stay here?" Elijah turned to her, his voice low but sure. "Because this is where the world told me I didn't belong. Now it's where I get to prove it wrong. She nodded slowly. You know, you changed more than this city. You changed me too. He looked at her, curious. How? When I saw you that day in the rain, waiting outside those glass doors, I realized how blind we were. You made me see it. Really see it. Elijah met her gaze. Then that day wasn't wasted. A few weeks later, a letter arrived. The return address, Hale Memorial Hospital. Elijah hesitated before opening it. Inside was a handwritten note. Dr. Brooks, the board has unanimously voted to rename our scholarship fund in your honor. The Elijah Brooks Fellowship will be awarded annually to minority students pursuing medicine. Your courage made us change what we value. I hope this is a small step toward the future you're building. R. Hale. Elijah read it twice, then folded it neatly and placed it on his desk beside his stethoscope. He didn't smile, but his eyes softened. Months passed, and the Brooks Institute thrived. Local kids came in for free checkups. Young doctors found mentorship, and old ones found renewed purpose. The city that once ignored him now embraced his vision. One evening, Elijah finished his rounds and stepped outside. The sunset painted the sky in gold and violet, the street alive with people heading home. A young boy sat on the steps, clutching a basketball. You a doctor here? The kid asked. Yeah, Elijah said with a small grin. You okay? The boy nodded. Yeah. My grandma's inside. Said this place don't turn nobody away. Elijah crouched beside him. She's right about that. The boy tilted his head. You the guy who built it? Maybe, Elijah said. Why? The boy shrugged. Just wanted to say thanks. Not a lot of folks care about this side of town. Elijah smiled faintly. We're changing that. He stood and watched as the boy's mother came to fetch him. As they walked off into the evening, Elijah felt that quiet warmth inside again, the kind that didn't need applause or headlines. He turned back toward the entrance, the lights above the sign flickering softly in the dusk. Brooks Institute of Community Medicine. For those who were told they don't belong. He touched the edge of the brass letters, remembering every door that once stayed shut. And then he walked through this one, his door open and waiting, for the next patient, the next chance, the next beginning. Because for Elijah Brooks, healing was never just about medicine. It was about rewriting what belonging meant. And this time, he had cured something much larger than a single heart. He had cured a system.